Hey guys, welcome to NAMA. We're trying out some new software, so let us know what you think. I'm just going to test the sound real quick as you guys are coming in. Say hi, as always. Let us know where you're watching from.
Yeah, and let us know if we sound really loud or really quiet or if the balance seems off.
Yeah, there should be
all that stuff.
significant improvements to the streaming quality in general. So definitely let us know about that. We're trying a wired connection, so it should be a lot smoother and a lot less likely to go out on us.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed, yes, indeed. We'll just let a couple minutes go by to allow people to come in. Sounds good.
All right.
Good. Okay, sounds good to me. As always, we're going to start with some news. When are we going to start up the next book for the book club?
I think we're going to start in October.
Okay.
I'm heading to California tomorrow morning, so I'm going to have a little bit more extra time to work on stuff. So my plan is to finish up the first book, Fred's book, with one last post, and then get started on Scent of the Missing.
Okay.
So hopefully within this next week is the plan.
Awesome. Okay, so that Scent of the Missing will be the next book. So if you don't have a copy, pick it up now.
And the author of that book is going to be at CNCA this January in California, the annual conference that the NACSW puts on with the California Narcotics Canine Association, which I believe is the 16th and 17th of January.
So we're going to try to have, we're going to try to have Patreon pay for us to go and cover all the action. Maybe we can interview the author while we're there.
That would be cool. See who we can talk to.
So definitely, if you have friends who aren't supporting us that might want to support us, let them know because we want to be able to cover all that action for you guys and make sure you guys have access to the information, even if you can't go.
Yeah, and if you can go, do, because it's a great
say hi
conference.
To us.
Yes.
Yeah. It is a good conference.
Twice. We haven't been able to go the last 2 years, but we went the first 2 years, and it was definitely worth going to. So we highly recommend it. Yeah.
As always, you can say hi to us on Patreon is the best way, but you can comment on Facebook or on YouTube. We'll do our best to answer there. If you have questions about what we're saying about Nosework, post your comments there so that we can get back to them in this live stream itself. Any follow-up questions we'll take as best we can, provided we have enough time. We don't want to stay up too late. Natalie has an early flight in the morning. So we're going to get right to it. So, any other news that we need to do? Oh, I filmed the interview with Roger Brannis. That interview will go on Patreon next month since I just posted Sue Sternberg's interview this month. You'll probably see a clip from it sooner than that. But it went really well. We talked about some really interesting Nosework things, and I think you guys will really enjoy it.
It's a long one.
Yeah. If there are people, it is. It's almost 2 hours long. So if there are people that you'd like to see me interview, that you'd want to hear from, me have a discussion with or debate with, if we have different training ideas, let me know, and we'll try to get it in the list of people we're planning on interviewing. So
yeah, we're working with some new software in hopes of being able to interview more people at a distance.
Yeah.
So that we can get good, clear interviews without having to be in person with people.
Yep.
All right, so we're ranting now.
So rant time. So this month's rant will be about training dirty. We talked about it a little bit last month, and let me explain what I mean by that. I've noticed a trend in the Nosework world to treat Nosework odors like we're in some kind of sterile laboratory environment. You have to put on a hazmat suit before you handle your odor kit. And man, it is just absolutely crazy. And the natural result of that is to have dogs that are very prone to struggle with residual odor and thus pooling odor problems.
And it's also kind of funny because we all know that Ron didn't train that way.
No, Ron, yeah. And so there are a lot of trainers out there who do what they call training dirty, which means they don't put gloves on, they stick that odor wherever they want, they move it from one container to the other, all these things that you're not supposed to
Carry odor around on you.
Yeah, in your pocket, right? Just throw it out into the search area, don't care where it lands. We don't care about residual odor. This is a hot box. Oh, well, I'm going to leave it out in the search area as a blank box, right? So you'd think that would cause a lot of problems, but in reality, it solves a lot of problems. dogs who regularly train dirty, let's say all the containers that you're searching have some amount of residual odor on them, the dog learns very quickly to move instead to only find the source odor and ignore all the residual and pools, which is exactly what we want in containers. We don't want dogs so sensitive to odor in containers that they will false on every container that has a molecule of odor on it.
And what we have to remember is that for our purposes, for this sport, there are odor thresholds that are not what we want our dog to respond to. And so that's what we're needing to train against.
Yes.
We're not looking for little tiny bits of TNT or that drugs were here. We want, a certain amount of odor on Q-tips.
But even that,
the dog driving to source.
Way back when I first met Roger, I asked Roger about this, and he said the same thing, that in the beginning of training the Popo rats, right, the rats who detect landmines in Africa, that they kept the training environment too sterile. And when they put the rats in the real world, they weren't able to work through the other distractions and things like that. So they actually had to do the training wrong in the lab. In other words, make it less sterile, less clean, less pretty to prepare the animal for real life. And I think we should do the same to our dogs.
Yeah.
As you guys know, probably if you listen to me a lot, I think that residual odor mirrors pooling odor really well. So if you have a pooling odor problem, the best way to fix that is to fix residual odor problems. And the best way to fix that is if the dog hits on residual odor, just wait. Wait for the dog to realize that doesn't pay and move on. Recognize that this is what they would be doing in their natural environment. If they stick and linger on residual rat odor for too long, they get really hungry. Eventually, they go find the actual rabbit. In barn hunt, we expect them from the ORT. They have to distinguish between residual and live. Imagine in the ORT for our dogs, if we had to do residual birch odor and the actual source odor. I actually think if we had to train to that standard, the dogs would be way better. And there's no reason your dogs couldn't do it.
Yeah, and since we've become less careful, particularly in containers, it seems like the dogs have gotten a lot better because they've become less sensitive to not only small amounts of odor, or odor only being present on one box, which is just not realistic in an ORT or container search when it's been sitting for hours. There's going to be odor on multiple boxes. But you also get a better chance to train against slobber, and slobber that has a lot of treats in it or whatever that can make the dog false just as much as residual can. Some dogs, like we discovered with Lumi, are even significantly more sensitive to slobber or knowledge that another dog has been paid there, or they think another dog has been paid there, than residual odor itself, if it were just odor that had been there and moved. So I was talking with a student about this last night, but sometimes what you need to work on is setting a hide, running a couple of dogs on it, and then moving it so that you have a bit of slobber and a bit of odor, and the dog can work through both of those. Because I think that's why we see so many issues on containers where you get that snowball problem on a container that got some slobber on it, got a little more slobber on it. Maybe someone even, then people start saying alert on it, and then you get even more slobber, maybe different kind of slobber. Maybe somebody drops a treat and it just becomes this huge mess. But it's not that hard to train against.
No. And in my opinion, you can't train too dirty. There's no amount of convoluted how much drool is on a space that had odor on it and how long that odor sat there before you moved it. There's no amount of dirty that's too dirty, in my opinion, with two exceptions. There's two exceptions where you want to train clean. And those are, one, when you're setting a competition. We have so many challenges to worry about. Residual odor doesn't have to be one of them. So we don't need that in competition. And COs in general are doing their best to make sure there isn't residual out. In fact, if you misplace a hide 90% of the times, that means we're scrapping the whole search area and picking a whole new search area, right? In AKC, they have boundary markers usually to tell you where odor was if they reuse the area. So that's very useful in competition. The second place is when you're introducing a dog to odor for the very first time. I want to present a somewhat clean exposure to the dog that they hit that odor and they get rewarded, and it's a simple picture before we start making it a little bit more complicated for them. And that's a soft one. I think you probably could.
We still don't turn it into lab conditions.
No, we never do that.
We're just a little maybe more we're not intentionally setting
like
slobber
hot boxes out,
Well, previously sort of hot, semi-hot boxes, so, not payable boxes.
I think some dogs you have to be more careful about how you introduce odor, and some you can be less careful. You just have to know what dog you're dealing with in the moment.
Yeah, and to some extent, that level of carefulness may just dictate how long it takes them to understand odor completely.
Yes.
It may just take them an extra week or two if that wasn't quite the right intro for them. To answer, what's her name?
Linda.
Linda's question. The author of Scent of the Missing is Susanna Charlson.
There you go. Okay.
Okay. Are we
So
done
is that the
ranting?
end of our rant? Yeah. So go out there and train dirty a little bit, right? Pull out some hot boxes and run your dog on them. Put the odor out in the wrong box, and pair it and let the dog work it out. Just 3 or 4 boxes. Try it out. See, it's not the end of the world. The dog will live, I promise you. And your dog will be better at the end of that training session.
And the dogs get, maybe the first time a dog is exposed to something like that, they might false. But once you've worked on it a little bit, they should go, oh, I know that's not source.
Exactly.
I understand my criteria better, so I can just go straight to source instead of wondering if this is payable or not. Because I think a lot of dogs are just confused about what our criteria is to pay them. And it's our job to figure out how we're confusing them and make that clearer.
Yes. Okay, so on to questions. Our first question is...
Did you send that to live?
Oh, yeah, let me send it to live. Apparently I need to do
new
that.
Tech.
Yeah, we're playing with new technology, so I hope you enjoy it. I hope it makes the experience that much better. But anyways, I've begun to be more consistent with pairing hides, and every once in a while, my dog will just take the treat and move on too quickly. Should I pair with something sticky like canned cheese or peanut butter? Not pair, not worry about it? So this is a good question. I think... Firstly, we have to define what it means too quickly. Takes the treat and moves on too quickly. So that means too quickly that you weren't able to get in there and reward again. If that's the case, to me, that's an odor obedience problem that should be worked on in the drill. And what I mean by that is set it up so that you're going to be right there next to the odor when your dog finds it. So before the dog can leave, you're already rewarding again and again and again and again. A lot of people train their dogs that one treat and we move on. And if you like that, you like that. I hate that. I want my dog to stick to that odor until I tell them to move on, right? They shouldn't leave that odor. They should be so odor obedient that I can try to pull on them and they don't leave. So I would work on that. I would let the dog know I'm coming in with more treats. And the more you press that button, the more treats come out.
And if you end up being too slow in that moment, even if you're all prepared and the dog wanders off, it's the only hide you've set.
Yes.
So just throw another treat down on it. So the dog comes back to go, oh my goodness, I thought I was done with this hide. What's going on? And then you have another chance to get in there.
Yeah. About using something stickier like peanut butter or cheese, you can do that. I don't think it's going to help your problem.
Dogs can lick something real fast.
They can. And even if they didn't, what's going to change? If we're not there rewarding for going back to odor and over again, then changing the treat isn't going to make a difference.
Another thing to think about is your praise.
Yes.
If you're being silent coming in to pay them some more, or if you're praising, if that's making a difference for them.
Yeah.
Because some dogs just don't, like Michael already said, they don't think you wanted them to be there at the hide longer. Yeah. But if they can start to understand that and praise really helps, then they'll wait because, they want to do it the way we want them to do it most of the time.
In my method of teaching nose work, I tell my handlers, the dog is not allowed to leave odor until we release them, right from the get-go. And the way we release them from odor is by picking up the hide, right? Until we pick up that hide, the dog should keep alerting, indicating whatever it is. They should keep indicating. And then we worry about competition training and how to get the dog to leave the odor later. It's not an issue. If you have any follow-up questions to that, let us know. Other than that, I think we're going to move to question 2.
Sounds good.
Okay. Question 2 is, how can you best support a dog that is nervous and not fully focused on searching in new environments, especially exteriors? My dog Mandy tends to be sound sensitive, but she improved greatly over the years. Good question. I think the best thing to do for dogs like that is to expose them outside of the context of nose work. The more we overcome their sensitivities, the better they tend to do. And you can do that in the context of nose work too, but don't shelter them too much. I think that's what we tend to do with dogs like this, is we tend to hide them away, when what we should be doing is putting them out in situations for short periods of time, letting them get used to it and move on very quickly. Our dogs are pretty solid, so we don't have too many really sensitive dogs. We have dogs who are very aroused by sights and movements, like Hazel with the cows at the trial.
Mm-hmm.
And
Icy for a while was quite sensitive about slick floors.
Yes.
We've worked on it a lot. We spent a lot of
time
going.
Exposure.
Yeah, going to, Tractor Supply or PetSmart or different places that have really slick floors. And we'd be in there 5 or 10 minutes. Sometimes we'd set a hide, and she would always then switch right into being perfectly fine, which is pretty funny.
Yeah, but that's the thing, is sometimes the nose work overshadows the problem, which is why you should expose them outside of nose work.
Yeah, so we switched to having her go and pick out a toy, and then she would get to carry the toy to the cashier, and they would sometimes give her a treat, sometimes not. But it made, just doing that once or twice a week for a while made a huge difference.
Yeah.
And a lot of us, even if we try to move our classes around, we tend to just work in one or two places most of the time. And so intentionally getting out to any new place you can, parks, Lowe's and Home Depot and Tractor Supply, and a lot of more like fancy downtowns are pretty dog friendly, and just giving the dog time in those areas.
Yeah. And constantly be assessing. This is the biggest problem I see with owners of fearful or nervous dogs, is that they get stuck remembering how fearful the dog was, that they don't recognize when the dog is better, or at least significantly better. Like you in your question acknowledge that the dog has gotten better, but it can be a gut reaction for us to just look at something and say, my dog can't do that. It's like, well, are you sure? How long has it been since you've tested it and seen it? How much confidence has the dog gained? Can the dog cope with it at this stage?
Yeah, and whether in nose work or just with their dinner, or, there are a variety of ways to do it, but you can set up intentional confidence building setups like the video Michael has with Blake, the Doberman, of, just on things, under things, over things, all of that. And, there are ways of building up their physical confidence that can make a big difference for their general environmental confidence. And we've had dogs in classes that like Tilly, who started with us quite a few years ago, and she was very, very worried about a lot of things. And she was the dog where invariably a car would backfire when she was searching, or the wind would pick up and start fluttering things around. But through the years, she has made just gigantic improvements. Yeah. And it's, it feels slow in the moment. And then you go to, see her at another mock trial, and she's handling things she never could have handled before. So I think keeping at it is a big thing.
Peg makes a good point, which is that sometimes the nose work gets bundled into the fear. And that can be true. And it's important to assess with your dog that competition isn't for every dog. So there's some dogs who are so fearful that it's worth not putting the stress, because I think the fear gets bundled with nose work when we're pushing them too much, too fast, not letting them take the time they need to work through their issues. I highly recommend watching some videos of horse trainers working with horses through fear. Obviously you have to be pick and choose, just like with dog trainers. There are some horse trainers who just force the horse to do it, but there's a trend in horse community to let the horse approach and retreat, and let the horse kind of work it out on their own, and not let them just run away from the thing all the time. And sometimes we're going to face our fear and work through it. I think if you do it that way, you can use nose work as a tool to overcome the fear. I think in the wild, right, animals are very afraid because everything's out to kill you in the wild. And the way you overcome your fear is you're hungry. You have to go out into the world to explore, or you're going to die of starvation. And that is how a dog overcomes his fear, is he's hungry and he moves into the world. And I think you need to simulate that for the dog in some ways when they're fearful, is you need to make them work for their food, all of it. No shelter. There's no security without that moving out into the world and hunting. I think that's really important for my dogs. I think that's part of the reason our dogs are so confident, is that we do that with them from a very young age.
Yeah, and like you said, not putting a time pressure on it, allowing them the approach retreat, not standing there inside yourself getting frustrated that your dog hasn't worked it out already. Have to be incredibly patient. And to go back to Tilly again, I think that's something that her mom gave her, which is allowing her to work through things at her own pace. She'd go home and practice things and just let her work through it.
Yep. Next question.
Yeah.
Okay. Our next question is, how do you and I think the changes in the rules are going to affect NW3 competition? It's a very good question.
It is a good question. It's a complicated one.
Yeah, and it's anybody's guess. I think from my perspective, it addresses the number one problem of NW3, which is the bottleneck. And so even if it handles that problem in an ideal way, it still is fixing the problem to some degree. That more people are going to filter into elite. And the standard of NW3 is too high as a test for whether or not you're ready for elite. It's great when it was just NW3 was the top of the sport. It was a great standard for who's the best. Yeah. But now there's elite and then summit. And dogs are caught at NW3 that really should be working on elite.
And they've been, like I have some friends that, and this would have been the case too if I hadn't had to retire my first nosework dog. But, we started out in NW3 way back in the beginning, maybe the 4th or 5th NW3 ever. And then it just took years to get through because of how much was changing with competitions. And so these are dogs that have been doing nosework for 9 or 10 years and are more than capable of elite searches. And then they're just little tiny things that go wrong. Just miss one little thing in trial, and then you have to do another one 3 times, So I think it'll be interesting because having the potential for blank searches in any search is it just adds a lot more to the complexity, but I think it also makes things more interesting. But also being able to have not just 3 interiors, but like, what if you had 3 containers? That is my least favorite competition search. And so that would be a lot for me to deal with, like mentally getting, ready to run my dog. Now, that's then something I should work on. I should find a way to not freak out about containers and just do them. And so I think it may help people kind of face their fears and train instead of, it's just one thing, I'll push through it.
Yeah. I've heard a lot of people online, I read posts about this, and it's very funny how many people, it's going to make NW3 so much easier than it used to be. And other people, it's going to be so much harder. Nobody seems to agree on whether it should be harder or easier. I think it's going to be harder for some people and easier for other people.
It's going to be really interesting to see.
I think from a CO perspective, it's easier now because we can use the environment to its best advantage. So if the location doesn't have 3 great interiors, we can do 3 great other searches.
Yeah.
And if none of the interior searches are really lend themselves to a blank search, we can still do a blank search in another element. I think that variability is going to make NW3 way more fun, way more interesting, and more flexible for people.
Yeah, you don't want the CO
flexible
to have
for
to
hosts too.
Pigeonhole things into the rules.
Yes.
So I think the more flexibility for them, the better, because the NACSW works hard on training these COs and trying not to approve them before they're ready. And so then once you've gone through that process, you want to give them the freedom to interpret those rules, to the best of their ability. And also, like, I don't think it's fun to have every trial be kind of cookie cutter and the same. I want some variation and some interest, and that's something that I really love about Elite, is that you don't know what kind of searches you're going to get, for any trial.
Yeah.
If there's going to be a twist on something, or if you're going to have all interiors or all exteriors or combo searches or, whatever. So I think it makes it more exciting. Now I need another NW3 dog.
Yeah, it's true. I'm looking forward to doing NW3 again with the new rules. I think it seems a little more fun. I don't care the fact that I would have had my NW3 way earlier under the new rules. I don't care about that. It's not interesting to me. Partially because I actually had fun doing my NW3s with Lumi. So, even though as competitive as I am, I don't actually care about the competitions. I don't care about being the best hot dog delivery person of the day. I do in the moment, just like I care that I won Monopoly with my family, but it doesn't change the way I feel about my family at the end of the game,
Yeah.
So I think I'm a big advocate for a way of competing that I think is just healthier. So next question. This is a kind of a very personal question in some ways, for me at least. When should I retire my dog? When to retire my dog? And for those of you who don't know, Lumi is retired from competition nose work.
Aren't you saying you're going to do an element trial with her?
Not competitively. So competitive means we're trying to get to nationals. We're pushing for the best scores. I might do an element trial as an experiment to see if the food work I've been doing with her made any difference. But she is completely retired. I'm not going back into competitions with her. She's done. And when do you decide to retire your nose dog? It's up to you. Now, from the activity of nose work herself, the dog's not going to be retired until she's dead.
Yeah.
There's no, if she can't get up to do a nose work search, in my opinion, for me personally, it's time to put her down, right? She can move, she can use her nose. That's my criteria. The competition, on the other hand, when do you stop having fun? When do you go out there and start being frustrated that you don't have the dog you used to have, right? And that's why I retired Lumi, is like, man, I wish I had that younger dog that I used to have. It's like, well, I shouldn't be feeling this, so I'm just going to stop competing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Because after all the time of going through NW3s for years to get Lumi's third one, I would have found it really difficult to not do an elite trial with her.
Yeah. No, doesn't bother me at all. I'll have more dogs in the future that I can compete with.
Yeah.
That's not an issue for me. And I actually have more fun in some ways doing these one-off events like the murder mysteries we do in games and things like that. So I can still have fun with her if I want. But I'd like to invest my time in my younger dogs in nose work competitively and let her go do some other things that we had never really done. Like we're doing competition obedience now, which is new.
Tried out barn hunt with her,
which
was her present for getting her NW3 elite.
It's true. So to me, it's about the relationship. So you should retire your dog no matter what age they are if it's not benefiting your relationship.
Yeah, and I agree a lot with what you said about not putting too much pressure on them. So I see a lot of people in elite that they finally gotten there.
Yeah.
And they're trialing this dog who's, between maybe 9 and 14. And they are frustrated that they're not getting the scores they wanted, or that the searches now seem really hard because their dog's not up to it, or maybe they're not up to it. But, for a lot of these dogs, it's just they don't have the stamina for 4 to 5 big searches with limited information. And so I think that's really, if you're at the point where the dog's not going to flourish in that, you have to find something else to do with them.
Definitely. Anything else to add about retiring dogs?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to look, and this is all along the same line, but looking at the physical abilities of the dog. I retired Cinnamon from competitive nose work when she was 7, I think. We had done 6 NW3s. We had not titled an NW3. We'd gotten at least half of those. We were one height away. Her very last one, we were off by this much. If I'd let her work back a little bit further and we'd gotten a yes on that height, we would have titled that day. And that was probably the very closest we'd come, although we'd had another fringe where if we'd gotten that right, we would have titled. Anyway, she had cerebellar abiotrophy, which is a degenerative neurological disorder, and she got to the point where she was falling over a lot, and it was way worse when she was doing nose work because she was all focused on her nose and couldn't control the rest of her body as well. And so the day I saw her do a search where she was stumbling over things at home, I retired her from nose work and even practicing at home, unless it was just a little bit in the living room where there was absolutely nothing to trip over, because it just wasn't safe for her. And so that's a sort of extreme example where it's pretty obvious that it's time to retire.
And it wasn't that much later that we ended up having to put her down.
Yeah, I put her down at 8.5. So it's probably about a year before I put her down. Maybe more like 9 months. and she was a young dog. I mean, Hazel is well over her age now. Hazel's almost 9. And Hazel can easily do summit trials, you know, but they're just with that neurological disorder, she just couldn't. And she loved it. It was by far her favorite thing. It was amazing for her temperament. She came so far because of nose work. So that was really difficult to retire her from, but I had to. So for, you know, for the rest of the time she had left, we played around and went on walks and played with the ball and stuff, but it had to be really limited physical stuff.
And this is kind of a parallel point that I think is worth making, that if you compete with your dog in nose work and you're not sure whether you should stop or if it's benefiting your relationship or anything like that, take a break for a couple of months. I had a student who actually had a forced break. She was excused from a trial and then was put on a suspension. And during that suspension, she was like, wow, I'm so much less stressed, that she was actually able to enjoy nose work again. She wasn't really enjoying nose work because of the stress of competing. And that's something worth considering. Just stop competing for a minute and say, do you miss it?
Yeah.
Or are you happy to not have to go and compete?
Yeah.
Don't do something you don't want to do that's not enriching you and your dog's life.
Yeah. One thing I noticed in myself, and part of why I went to the summit trial there were a few reasons I went to the summit trial back in May, but one of the big ones was I really missed trial and wanted to get back into it and wanted to test myself and you know, see where we were and how we were doing. And people are surprised because I don't come across as a very competitive person, but I absolutely love competing in nose work. But I also have dogs who like it, who get amped up by it, who like to show off and don't shut down with it. And so that's a super important consideration too. If I had a dog that shut down when we trialed, you know, it wouldn't be fun for either of us, because I want to do well. I mean, I am actually quite competitive in nose work. I had another thought and I lost it. Oh, another thing you can try if you're not sure about if it's time to retire, if it's the stress of competition, if you just don't like it or whatever, would be to do a fun day that's just not at that stress level, competitive level, as a real trial, and see if you enjoy that more. Because for some dogs, that may be more than enough. You may not need to go to real competitions with ribbons because it's too much stress for one or the other of you.
Okay, next question. What vet drugs can impact a dog's ability to smell or their learning?
Should have done some research
Yeah.
for this one.
Honestly, I'm not even willing to comment on something I don't know about, but I wanted to put this up there because maybe at some point we will interview a vet and we'll save this question for them. I really have no idea. My dogs aren't on any medication. Natalie's dog's on medication right now, and it's just making her spastic, but I don't...
It probably is affecting her nose.
I'm sure it is. It has to. I mean, if it's affecting your body and your brain, then it has to affect your learning.
Yeah. There was a discussion in the Southern California Nosework events group a little while ago. I think it was that one. Maybe it was another one. Where a vet who used to be our student in Southern California was commenting on a drug she was reading about in one of her vet textbooks that listed a side effect being affecting their nose, making it harder for them to do scent detection.
Yeah.
I am terrible with drug names, so I don't remember what it was. I can probably look it up.
And I personally would be very skeptical about what is said out there and look at the sources for that, because you know, it really needs to be done in a study. If my dog was on this drug and it affected them this way, that's not good evidence that that drug will affect your dog or any other dogs in that way. We don't know what else was going on or what condition the dog was taking the drug for. That condition might have affected the scent work and not the drug. We don't know.
Yeah, and I think there are studies on some of this. So if you're interested in the topic, you can do some of that research.
But even research the studies themselves, because I've been going through lots of studies recently for other things, and the studies are just so poorly done.
Yeah.
Really know what makes a good study and what doesn't.
So many of them are like 6 dogs or 10
exactly.
dogs.
A 6-dog study is not enough.
But also, if your dog gets on meds and you are planning on competing with them, maybe do some practices to see where you're at.
Yes.
Because maybe you will really frustrate yourselves if you do that competition.
Totally. Okay. Can you discuss buried hides in water and sand, so submerged versus buried,
Which are both in the buried class in AKC.
I've noticed dogs struggling with water, which I didn't think would be the case. Buried in sand hides seem to be difficult for some dogs as well. How can I help them gain confidence? I already paid and started with it on top of the sand and slowly lowered it. Good question.
Yeah, do you want to start out by talking about how you like to introduce buried hides?
Well, no, I think what I would say to start out with is that all new containers are hard when you first introduce them. I think it's really easy to forget. Yeah, when we first introduced ORT boxes to the dogs, most dogs struggled with it. They were like, "What's a seam? I don't know what that is." And then back in the past, now most people haven't had this experience. But then when we introduced luggage to the dogs, they had the same problem. Like, I don't know.
And people trialing AKC are really noticing that, because you can have luggage even at the relatively low levels in AKC, and that's really hard.
And we do classes with our where our mixed level classes, dogs who are really experienced, dogs who are really new, we do searches in shoes. And that shoe has a big old hole on top, and we stick an odor in there, and some of the dogs really struggle with that.
Well, and the seams that we visually see as humans are often not the seam that the odor is coming out of. And so we have to ask the dog what the useful seams are. Yes. And if you have a very strong, very experienced dog who can help you see what the seams are before you run other dogs, that can be useful too.
Yeah. So I guess the main point to be made is that sometimes struggling is the normal progression of learning. They have to struggle before they get good at it. I had to struggle at playing the violin before I learned how to play the violin. And it's normal. I shouldn't be like, what's wrong? What's wrong is that I'm a beginner, right? So assess, are they struggling so much that in your opinion, it's beyond what it should be expected? In which case there may be ways to make it easier. In general, I tend to just let the dogs work it out, and I don't get involved. Eventually the dog's going to make a good choice, or a good enough choice that I can pay them, and they get better each round. They really do. And each week or month or whatever, however often I do it.
Yeah. But if you start with a 4-inch buried hide, or a 4, whether it's sand or water, I would expect it to take the dog quite a while to work that out, unless you've let it sit for a couple of hours to really come out. But if you've gone progressively to help them understand what the relevant seams are for this kind of search, they'll work it out.
Don't you have a course for submerged hides?
I do. On Scentwork University, I do have a water hides course.
And maybe you can make some lessons for Patreon.
Yeah, we could.
Yeah. And I have a buried curriculum that we should make a course for on Patreon, because it's super simple.
Yeah. I mean, they're almost identical, just in different mediums.
Yeah, sure.
They're very similar. But I actually did a private lesson with a few students a couple weeks ago on water hides. And some of the dogs, so there are 3 of them, and they went at very different rates in terms of their understanding of the water hides. But by the end of the hour, they all were working it out, hitting them quite nicely. But, some struggled with early rounds, some struggled with later rounds. It just takes time. But one thing I noticed when we first started playing around with buried in containers, I set up, we had done it a couple times in class to introduce the concept. And then I had set up a competition prep search that was buried. And the dogs so these were quite experienced dogs who had done a lot of regular containers, but had only done maybe a class or 2 on buried. And they tended to go really fast up and down the rows and not catch anything. And then go really fast up and down again. And they would do maybe 3 passes of that. And then they would go, okay, this isn't working. I better slow down and actually think about this. And then they started sniffing carefully each container. And then they went, oh, here it is. And so now it's just a matter of expectation, them thinking they could get away with being fast and sloppy, and needing to take the time to realize that they shouldn't. And if you rush that as the handler, like if you take them to competition and expect them to find it in 10 seconds, it's not reasonable if you haven't practiced it significantly. Yeah.
Another thing that's worth mentioning is that whenever we add a new challenge like this for competition, we should reevaluate our foundation level classes. So for instance, there should be a submerged element in all of our primary classes now that we know they're going to have a submerged element in trial. Mm-hmm. So on food or on toy, right from the beginning, do some submerged hides like that.
Yeah, last summer we were doing those kiddie pool searches, especially for our VHOG group, and we had a dog or two on food, and they did beautifully. Yeah. And we love doing kiddie pool hides. We've been doing those for years and years and years, and that is, I think, is an excellent way to introduce water hides, because they get to start to understand how odor works in water without sort of the pressure of containers. Get a little bit more like freedom to work, and it's actually harder to pinpoint an odor in a kiddie pool than it is to just pick a box that has the odor in it. And I think that precision and clarity can really help water hides.
Absolutely. Okay.
And it's fun too.
It is fun. Okay, how to stay focused at a trial as a handler. Pre-run preparation, visualization, routine use, is it helpful? Good question.
It's a good question.
I'm a big believer in visualization and pre-run routines, that kind of thing. I really believe that doing nose work is mindfulness meditation. It's about being completely aware of what you're doing and what you're thinking in the moment, and that you have to stay incredibly focused during a nose work search in order to be successful. And any break in focus can ruin it, dismantle it in an instant.
Yeah, but you also don't want over focus on things that should be in your subconscious, like leash handling and footwork. You need to be able to kind of let those go so that you can focus on the dog and yourself a little bit more. And Lenny Basham in what's it called? Mental Management talks a lot about what should be kind of letting things go to your subconscious so that you can be very present.
If you haven't been to Tia Anders' nosework specific mental management courses, it's highly recommended.
It's so worth it. A lot of people have seen a lot of improvement you have to do the steps, but if you actually do them, it makes a huge difference.
But if you're not doing mindfulness meditation already as just a regular practice, I would really highly recommend it as a competitor. It'll make you a better competitor. Not to mention it's just a good practice. But and then at the trial, you have to come up with some way of putting extra details that are not useful to you away. So some of these details are who the judge is and what they're thinking about you and the spectators, right? Yeah. That's not relevant. Another detail is whether or not you're going to title today. You're not in control of that. What you're in control of is your action in the moment, right? And that's what you should focus on. Don't worry about the last search. Worry about this search. Don't worry about the next search. Worry about this search, right? If you focus on just what you're doing in the moment, you're going to do better than trying to juggle all these ideas, and nationals is in a couple of weeks and I need this many qualifying points. That does not help you in the middle of a search.
Yeah.
So focus on your dog, focus on your search pattern, focus on whatever your instructor has told you is important to focus on. And that's my main recommendation. I did do one thing at a trial that helped, and I'll share it here. It was kind of a unique situation because I got into a trial that I was going to, and great. And like 2 weeks before, there was another trial with the same CO, and they asked me to be the dog in white. And I was like, wow, that's so cool. Awesome. So I went, and, sure enough, I titled, quote unquote, as the dog in white. Of course, you don't get a real title if you were dog in white, but in my mind, we did everything that we needed to do. And I realized that there was some extra stress that was affecting my performance in regular trials. And so I started thinking, what can I do to fix that? So in 2 weeks, when I got to the actual trial, I said, I'm the dog in white. And I just went in like I'm the dog in white. And it made a huge difference in my run, in the way I presented myself, the way I worked my dog, the way I felt. The other thing that I do that won't work for everyone is I go into the search and say, my goal is to do a search that I would be, that is a model for my teaching method for my students, because I'm going to take the video and I'm going to post it online, which I do. All of my search videos I post online for you guys. So I don't care about the title or what this and that. What I care about is modeling my method to my students. And when I do that, I focus on different things. I focus on just doing my job right. And believe it or not, it works because that's why I teach it, right? So those two things really made a difference for me.
I think one thing about putting yourself in the shoes of the dog in white, if you've never done it, you're there to allow the CO to see how the search is working.
Mhm.
And so she's not going to let you search for 5 minutes. You know, you're going to kind of get in, get out, see what your dog responds to. And I think that removes a lot of the hemming and hawing that we tend to do in the search that really screws us up.
Yeah.
To talk about pre-run routine just really quickly. Mine goes back pretty far in the day. For example, if I know that I'm up in like 3 or 4 dogs, I take my dog out to potty, I put her back in the car, then I get my treats ready, her collar ready, her line ready, and all that. And then when they call us, I hook her up to her regular collar, and then we go and we do our waiting. And then when we get to the judge's steward, I put her nose work collar on and I switch my leash. And so all of these things are very consistent every time. And so that helps me start to get in the mindset of competing. And then, you know, and then sort of after that depends on the search. Because some people, they think a lot about, okay, I'm going to walk up to the start line, I'm going to stop, and I'm going to stare at my dog for 10 seconds. But what if you're walking up and the dog has caught odor? And now you need to modify things a little bit. And so, you know, we may all have different points at which we decide our routine starts and want to make that consistent. And for some people, like having the same treat jacket or vest every time is part of that routine. So just think about what is specific to you.
Yeah. And I think it's important that you don't let that routine become something that can
Go
wrong. Exactly. Because, and this is something we practice in our classes is, okay, go get your dog, but you're not allowed to get the leash you like. You have to use this leash. And that's to simulate you forgot your leash at home or something. And if your routine is, I have to have this leash and do that, and then my lucky leash and the whole day's ruined. Well, okay, then the whole day's ruined for you. But if you've practiced it and you practice not having your collar, not having your treats and having to borrow treats, not having whatever, not being rushed to the start line instead of being able to take your time. And either you go to the start line, you go, but you could collect yourself, or you say, I need time, back off, right? Either one.
If you haven't practiced telling people you need more time, you're probably not going to do it.
No, you're definitely not going to do it.
And absolutely, like I try not to be a very set in stone kind of person. But even like the NW2 where I titled with Cinnamon, I left her collar in the hotel. And this is like my 3rd trial ever. And so Michael and I like tried to we would trade collars when he would come back from his search and stuff. Yeah. But yeah, don't marry yourself to any of these things. Same with like whatever you decide your search strategy is for that day.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people spend way too long looking at the search area in the walkthrough, taking video, taking pictures, deciding exactly where they're going, noticing too many things like why is that broom in that corner, and just nonsense is not going to help you. And then talking about it with people next to them. Don't talk to people at trials about this nonsense. Like, don't talk about the trial at all because this is not helpful.
At least don't talk to me.
Yeah, don't talk to me. Don't talk to either of us.
No, it drives me crazy. And when I see it as a CO, I'm like, oh man, I wish I could at the very last minute change the search area. And I'll do that in my classes. I used to do that for an ORT exercise when I'm prepping my students for RT. I would say, okay, this is your box search. Here's your start line. Okay, any questions? Blah, blah, blah. We talk it out. Everyone's making their notes. I kick everyone out and I move the start line.
And that has
all I do is move the start line.
At trial, yeah. When I trialed Ghost for her NW2, I had a plan for the vehicle search, and we walk up to it, and they said, "Sorry, we had to move the start line. It is on entirely another side of these vehicles. It was on this end, and now it's over here and long." And so I had to go, okay. Yeah. I've seen something like this before. No big deal. I'm changing my strategy for this. Yeah. But you can't let that freak you out.
It's amazing how many people in my classes just completely freak out. And that's why I do it. It's like, you got to get control of yourself first off. It's
because we hold on to these plans as security blankets. Yeah. And then that changes and we have
not to mention, usually the change is there to make things better for you.
Yeah, to help you.
So it's worth,
like maybe there were bees over there.
Yeah.
Or a dog barking or something.
Or maybe the wind's blowing a certain way, and they just want to make the search a little easier.
Yeah. Assume that even if they're not.
Yes.
Assume that things are in your favor.
Exactly. That's an important assumption to make. Okay.
Mhm.
Next. Okay, this is a little longer in actuality, so I'm going to read the long version. During our last trial, an L1C, my dog looked like two different dogs. Out of the 4 searches, 2 were super focused and 2 were what I can only call weird, since he looked like he had way less training than in the other ones that were great. I've heard other people say they relate to this as well. For the first weird one, I may have crowded him, but for the second one, I was really aware of that, and honestly, I'm not sure what happened. Any idea on why I'm getting a dog A and a dog B in the course of the same day? That's another really important question. This kind of inconsistency we see a lot in our dogs. I think one thing is,
I wonder if,
Yeah.
and if this person, I don't know who asked this, but if you're watching, maybe you can clarify right now. Were the 2 good searches and the 2 weird searches next to each other, or were they intermingled?
Yeah, that's true. Well, and that's kind of what I'm getting at is that if we practice, it tends to be consistently at the same time of day, for instance, right? So if we always practice in the evening, then morning searches tend to be hard. And if I always practice in the morning, then evening searches be hard. If I practice morning, evening, but I'm gone all day at work, then afternoon searches get hard. And if I never practice in the afternoon during summer because it's too hot, then that's going to be hard for my dog. And if in winter I only practice in the afternoon because morning and evenings are too cold, then that's going to affect the dog. So we have to be careful not to be too consistent. That consistency produces an inconsistency in our dog's performance because they're used to only performing under a very specific set of conditions.
Yeah, and then another category is stamina.
Yeah.
And, it sounds like you probably have some experience trialing, and so this was a bit out of the ordinary. But I've known dogs that were great for their first 2 searches a day and then just couldn't hold it together for the next searches. For some of them, it's because they weren't resting in their crate when they went back. They were stressing. And so that's something to think about. There may be something else that happens with the dog that, worries them or just makes them off. They have some experience in the middle and aren't able to kind of push past it. So without knowing the dog and you and the situation and seeing videos, I don't know that we can say anything specific about your case, but there are a lot of generalities that may come into play.
Yeah.
I've talked about her a lot tonight, but my first nose work dog, Cinnamon, was so inconsistent. She had some great days. I mean, she was 2nd place overall in her NW1 and she was 3rd place overall in her NW2, but she had a lot of days where she was wildly all over the place with some great searches and some ones where it seemed like she'd never done nose work before. The day of her first ORT, we wandered around the boxes for 3 minutes, staring at the clouds. And even after we timed out and the judge pointed out the box to us, she didn't respond to the odor at all. Now, in retrospect, I was probably a mess, and that's probably why she wasn't working. I wasn't experienced enough to know that or handle that. But then we went to a mock trial, same location, same day, just a couple hours later. She was perfect. She passed every search in the mock trial. But I wasn't freaking out, so of course. But then even, I think for the duration of her nosework career, if we did warm-up boxes at the trial, she would act like she'd never done containers before. And then she'd go in and maybe she would do beautifully that day or maybe she wouldn't. But it was not related. How she did warm-up boxes did not correlate to how she did in the trial day. She was just all over the place. And some of that, I think, may have been her disease that I wasn't aware of. Some of it, I think, was just her as a dog. She's a very spastic Aussie Border Collie mix. A lot of it was our training. There were a lot of things I didn't know. There were a lot of things our trainer maybe didn't know how to help us with or just didn't. And I was very, very new. And so I didn't know how to compensate for some of those things or to give her more clarity about what her job was. So I think she had a lot of confusion about what her job was. And after we sort of badly taught her a formal alert because we had to for trial at the time, then she was offering me this trained formal alert whenever she got stressed in a search. So, you can see from that there was just a real lack of clarity in her.
Yeah. About ways to throw a dog off. We did a mock trial once where there were 2 searches back to back and there were both find as many as you can. But the interesting thing was the first was a large interior and the second was a large exterior. And when they left the door from the interior, most of the dogs completely turned off and thought they were going back to the car. And if you practice regularly, go and search, and then go back and you're done for a bit, and you don't practice, go search, and now we walk to another search and you go search again, then that's going to be something that throws the dog off too. So if they're great here and then they're off here, maybe they thought they were done with the search and they're waiting to go back to the car.
Yeah, I think a lot of dogs, if this is maybe the first or second trial experience for them, they may never have gone straight from one search to another. That's not necessarily something we do a lot in class.
Mm-mm.
But I'm going to do that next time I have a class.
Yeah, no, it's really important
I
to
haven't
do.
in a while. But you usually, for a level 1 or NW1, you're going to have at least a couple
2 searches back to back. Exactly. Yep, exactly. Okay. And as always, ask follow-up questions if we didn't quite answer your question. That to me is the main heart of why you get inconsistency in a dog. Okay, how does age affect the scenting dog? In the professional working dog community, there's a theory that the acuity of detection is reduced at a certain age. I am very skeptical of a statement like that. In my opinion, dogs as they age gain more experience. So whatever they lose in, and it's not acuity, it would be like endurance or athleticism or speed. What do they lose in that? They gain in just pure experience of being able to solve a problem much quicker. So I haven't seen in my dogs any lack of acuity. Lumi can still smell which pocket has a hot dog in it in the whole hamper of laundry and drag that out and rip a hole in it.
She's not old yet.
She's not old. Yeah, that's true. Although we've had dogs in our classes way old who have been great, some better than some of the young dogs. And I think it has more to do with just their overall drive and fitness than anything else. Now, for the professional world, I think age does make a difference, because if you're working for multiple days, I don't think you lose any acuity of your nose, but you lose stamina. You lose just agility and all of those factors that are really important to a nose work dog, but has nothing to do with their nose.
And I think, this can really depend on the individual dog as well. Because I've watched a lot of old dog search, but I've seen a couple of individual dogs who were significantly old for their breed. One was maybe 13, 14. The other one may have been similar, where it seemed like they were having more trouble sourcing hides. They were catching hides, they were working hides, but working them out seemed to be taking significantly longer than it took a year ago. And so some of that may be the way individual dogs age. Some part of their brain may just not be working as well as it once did. And, with the brain issues we know about in humans, that wouldn't surprise me to know that that's possible. So I think you have to pay attention to your own dog and see what you think about if they're changing, and also be honest with yourself about that. But I remember Dave Ellison, who's here on Patreon, brought his girl to a game day in Palmdale or Lancaster back at the beginning of the year. And he mentioned to me, and he may want to expand on it here if he sees this, that he was noticing a slowdown in her sourcing. And I had noticed it too in the search I had watched right before that. So it's an interesting topic, something to pay attention to.
Sure. Yeah, and every dog's different. So what's old for one dog is not old for another dog, just like people.
Yeah. Because we've seen dogs come to class that started as 12-year-olds and are spectacular.
Yeah.
So it's super individual. And I don't think you should discount your dog and say oh, they're turning 12 or 13. They can't do this anymore. Just watch what they show you they can do. Because we've had other dogs in class that had maybe had some health issues and were aging, and the owner was starting to kind of cut them off in searching and just pay. The dog caught the odor and was kind of working towards it, and they would just rush in and pay. And I think that really discounts the dog's abilities. And then also, I think of nosework sometimes as a Sudoku brain puzzle, where your dog is getting the benefit of working it out. And if you interrupt them and just pay, you're robbing them of some of that benefit of working it out. And when she stopped brushing in and paying and started letting him work it out again, the dog's drive increased and he seemed way happier about searching. So,
yeah. So it's almost 9 o'clock right now. We've been doing this for just about an hour. We're going to take one more question. We have a lot more questions than this, but those remaining questions will be the top of the list for the next NAMA. And, if you have questions, anybody with a $5 or more slot gets priority access to asking questions to us, and we'll try to keep chipping away at them every month. So let's look at our last
we were very pleased when we asked for questions because we had none like a week ago. That we got a lot of really good questions, and we've taken probably a lot more time than usual on some of these.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, this is a long one. Let's see. Okay, could you address a problem I created? Montana had gotten so that she really stuck to source. And then I got lazy when you moved, and I was going to AKC trials because I could get in and trial more often. At trials, she would find a source, and because I was a bit slow, she would look back at me and then put her nose back on source. I was not practicing as much as I should. As she advanced, it was harder to put her nose on source, and she was getting rewarded close. Now she finds it. I'm not sure she even puts her nose on it and steps back and looks at me. When I say alert and I'm asked where, I'm guessing. Is pairing the only thing I can do?
I think the main thing you can do is practice. If you're only trialing and not practicing, you're going to end up with this problem. I'm not going to go into it again because I have before, but I ended up with the same problem with one of my dogs. And even at novice, you can be thinking the dog's sourcing and they're not necessarily as close as you want them to be.
Yeah, I actually don't think this is one of the few problems that pairing doesn't actually fix it. It won't hurt. It'll definitely it'll help the dog get to the source, but if you're not rewarding at the right time, if you're being lazy about where and when you're rewarding, then pairing is not going to solve the problem. But once that pair goes away, the dog's just going to go back to their old habit of alerting where they know you're going to pay. So you have to raise your criteria in training. You have to say your nose has to be on it. And if your nose is not on it, I'm not rewarding you.
And so know where the hide is.
Yes.
Know exactly where it is. And don't take communication that's early.
Yeah, I'm so against doing blind hides in class. I don't do them. We do them in trial. We do them on game days. I do them in the primary classes when your dog's on food. But once your dog's working on competition nose work on odor, we're doing drills. We're perfecting the dog's behaviors. That's what you need to be doing. Go back to your foundation. Reward nose on the odor. Make sure the dog goes back and puts their nose on the odor, and you're not rewarding anything else.
And do your standing back up or backing up or things, and then they get back to source and you pay again. So they really understand that you want them sourcing it. And this is just like you know it in your question.
Yes.
It's just a matter of the criteria has changed for her because of what's been happening at trial. So you can just change it back again. It was easy to change by doing a few months. We haven't gone that long. A few months of a bunch of trialing. So it won't take you that long to fix it.
No. And I had something to say and I lost it completely. Dang, what could it have been?
Something on topic, I'm sure.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I guess just a matter of training. I wish I remembered what I had to say. It was going to be something super important, and it's lost. It's lost for all time. Yeah. So.
Oh, and don't anticipate.
Yeah, that's true.
Because if you're reaching for stuff, getting ready to pay, that's when your dog is like, okay, they've decided it's time to pay. This is close enough.
I know what it was. So if you continue down this path and you're sloppy with your training and reward timing and placement, the next step is for her to begin false alerting because she's not getting towards the source. So she's going to start wondering if the odor is even an important part of the equation, or can she just look back at you randomly? At first, it'll be just the skirts of the odor cone, and then it'll be, do I even need an odor cone? Or can I just look back at you and you're going to still pay me? So don't get to that stage. Nip it in the bud, fix it now. And just go back and train. You have to train more than you're trialing by at least a factor of 10. So keep that in mind. And it sounds easy, but if you're training every week,
the blessing and curse of having so many trial opportunities it can be very easy to let this stuff slide. So you have to be very
Absolutely.
intentional about it. And like, this probably isn't the case with you specifically, but with some people, if you've got a trial potential every weekend or every other weekend, you're probably not practicing more than once in between, if that. And so you probably need to say no to some of those trial opportunities.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's important. And if your classes are basically emulating a trial, and so you're going and just doing blind searches there, then that, you have to understand that your training has to compensate for that too.
Yeah, because
that doesn't
compounding how much you're trialing and testing yourself.
Exactly. So worth thinking about.
And I know that you, in particular, travel quite a bit, and Montana comes with you, so you can take this anywhere and everywhere you guys are traveling, and quickly regeneralize the criteria that you want.
Yes, absolutely. So the rest of the questions will be rolled over to next month.
Hopefully there's nothing that was terribly pressing.
Yeah, exactly. Someone's like, next week, if my dog can't find the odor, I'm rehoming them, and you answer this question, then they're safe. Hopefully that didn't happen. But we've got several other really interesting questions. Again, Roger's talk is coming out next month. Keep an eye out for that. What else have we got? A book club coming out next month.
We were going to do a giveaway.
Oh, yeah. So why don't you do that?
Real quick?
Go ahead.
Are we doing what we talked about?
Sure.
Are you going to be the artist?
Artist. No, we're not doing that.
Okay, then how do you want to do it?
You just pick a code word that people... Hashtag NAMA. The first person to...
Hashtag NAMA22.
Hashtag NAMA22, because this is episode 22. Type that on Patreon. The third person to write hashtag NAMA.
Good luck timing that.
Yeah, gets to be have a video analysis
from whichever one of us you want. You can specify that either in your typing NAMA22 right now, or when you send in the video. Either way.
I know one thing that I need to do. I'm gonna be right back.
So you guys can be typing and trying to be third while he's doing that.
Where did I put his collar?
That is a good question. You're not wearing it, is he? Let's see if we already have our winner.
No, it's not wearing it. Here it is. Okay, so Catfish, for those of you who have been following his progress, this is his nose work collar. I hope you guys like it. It's a fish scale pattern. It's a little glittery. It's a very pretty collar. I picked it out when, like, the day after I got him. I was like, I know what kind of collar I want. It has to be a fish scale because his name is Catfish. I looked for catfish specific collars.
And we wanted it to be kind of blue.
Yeah, blue is his color. We color code all our dogs. And he's getting this collar because he will be going on odor soon. So in his series
episode, right?
Yeah, probably the next. Well, no, not the next episode, because the next episode is his field trip.
Haven't posted the next that episode. So the next actual in real time
will probably be me introducing odor to him. And we're going to do a couple things. I want to demo the way I normally introduce odor for people in my classes so that you can see that. And then I'm also probably going to be playing around with some different things. Some things I've been researching about training dogs to freeze and seeing. I want to experiment as a trainer to see, is it going to ruin my dog or not? And I'm just going to play around and have some fun with him because I enjoy training.
Give you guys some fun ideas if you want to play around with some stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I really hope you guys enjoyed that. Let us know if the streaming quality was better with all of this new stuff.
And how you felt about the questions coming on the screen, if that worked well, if the sound cut out at any times.
Sure.
Or,
and do we have a winner?
You liked or didn't like? I'm not sure if we have 3 yet.
I think we do.
We picked the wrong number. There are not enough people today.
Okay, so we'll be waiting for comments on Patreon. We'll see them, and we will see you guys next time, which will
And
be
maybe
when.
we'll modify who gets
When
to
will be the
win.
next NAMA?
Oh, that is a good question.
Let me look at the calendar real quick.
Our schedules
You'd
are
think
about to
we'd
get
pick
crazy.
this before we started filming, but no.
Of course not. We didn't have any technical difficulties today, so we couldn't possibly
It's
look
true.
at this stuff.
So it looks like the 30th of October,
There we go.
the day before Halloween. We should do that in costume, right?
Okay.
Apparently Natalie says no. Oh my gosh. I don't know if you can tell what shade of red she just turned. I don't know. Okay.
I'll be very amused if you actually wear a costume. We'll see. Let's see what happens.
I'm in a costume right now.
Sure you are.
I'm just as myself. Anyways, we will see you guys next month on the 30th. Start submitting your questions now if you want to get in on NAMA. And thanks for supporting us on Patreon.
Yes, thank you. Have a great month.